So through this process, even though we focused on the 3 families of fish we talked about, other ones did come up that the public was concerned about. And in most cases, we looked at bag limits as a way to prevent overharvest. Holy Holy has currently got a minimum size, but what is being proposed is to remove that and to put a bag limit on them. And part of the impetus for that is a lot of people catch these things with their little dip nets and use them for bait and things of that sort. And we didn't, the feeling was that that shouldn't be criminalized. So another way just to protect is to have that bag limit, 20 fish. Veil, even though from time to time you have these big blooms like you did on Oahu, overall the consensus from the public we talked to is that these things are fairly rare compared to how they once were, and they wanted a bag limit for a veil. Kole is one of those hot button issues where people really like kole. They go out, they harvest them, big groups, usually for parties and so forth. Funny story, when you go to Molokai, they don't want any rules for anything except for kole. Every time I go to Molokai, they say you got to do something to protect the kole. So, it's interesting that fish is so far, but it is a surgeon fish. So its growth is really slow. Most of these surgeon fish take 3 to 5 years or more to become mature, and then they live quite a while. So, given that fact, if you go into an area and you harvest a bunch of adults, you can affect that population pretty quickly because it's just not built into the population structure. It takes a long time for the juveniles to become adults. Manini, the size limit was proposed to go up to 6, be more in line with when they reproduce, but there was a lot of negative pushback, particularly from subsistence fishers who said that when they get too big, they're no good to eat.
Yeah.
So they really pushed keeping it. This is just an example. This is just an example of how we try to appease everybody, right? In most cases, minimum sizes when we set them are based on the size of the fish we produce. But in this case, we kept it at 5 to keep that subsistence fishery happy. But are looking at a 20 fish bag limit. Mepachi, there's no functional way to put a minimum size because there's 2 or 3 different species that are common, and there's a big difference in their size of reproduction. So instead, we're looking at just a bag limit, 20 fish. And this is another one that potentially controversial. Although there was a lot of support for this and a lot of concern, we are not proposing any kind of a commercial exemption at this point. So that would kill a lot of the commercial harvest. And 2, it is a possession limit. So overnight fishing, like you mentioned, catching a lot of fish, you wouldn't be able to allow to possess more than 20 per person. We didn't go out and specifically recommend regulations for any of these, different than before, but it came out of the public meeting. And the public talked a lot about the fact that the veil is much rarer than it used to be, that they used to catch a lot more, they don't catch as much, they're concerned, and the Mepachi is much less than it used to be. So they're talking, this is a lot of that. I mean, you're not going to go to Kahului and talk to somebody and get that kind of information. A lot of this came from communities.
Yeah.
Moving on, the other ones, I mean, the minimum size for Maui would be more in line with what the L50 is, 12-inch. Moo, 14-inch. Bag limits, some of these seem really reasonable and people support. Others, depending on how you fish, they're not support. 5 fish Maui. A lot of guys, yeah, okay, that makes sense, but the throw-net guys freak out on this. So even the 20 fish holy, throw-net guys freak out on. So there's, this is why I said right off the bat, nobody's going to be 100% happy. There's going to be things, depending on how you fish, that people are going to be upset about. This is kind of, again, these numbers, they all came out of public discussion. So anyway, that is the proposals. Like I said, we did a lot of meetings. We actually had questionnaires where we specifically asked And we targeted fishermen. I mean, there was non-fishermen who filled these out as well, but we passed them out of fishing tournaments, fishing stores, etc. We had 128 returned. And of that, for most of the proposals we just talked about, there was over 70% support, or around 70% or more. There was a few that weren't, like the 5-year moratorium for Kuma was 49% support. That was the only one less than 50%. But we changed that in our current proposal to a bag limit of 1 instead. You know, as I go through here, you know, there was 70% support for the no-take blue male uhus, the 2 large species. There's do I have the omilu? Oh yeah, maximum size for omilu at 24% or 24 inches, 64% support. So a little less than 70 in that case. Yeah, most things were, you know, but this is a general far-reaching effort to get the fishermen of different types. Most of them were probably recreational types of mindset. I know that's not necessarily going to be the makeup at public hearings, however, because the people who come to hearings are usually passionate enough and upset enough about certain components to come out. But this is really one of the more difficult things we have to do, and we're trying to truly accurately describe the public's overall take on something.